All right, welcome back to Coalition Purple. Had a little hiatus once again.
Yeah,
Um, I don't know.
life.
Life just gets so complicated at times, but we're back on, and I really miss it too because it's like it is my therapy for all the craziness going on in the world. So, anyways, how things going your way?
Good. Just trying to survive the rain, getting through the holidays. Holiday hectic is always crazy, but pretty good.
Yep, yep. No, it's so funny 'cause being living here in Southern California when just even the hint that it might rain just like paralyzes everybody here. It's like, hey, try living in Wisconsin or Minnesota or someplace for a while. It's like
Oh yeah.
it really isn't. We're going to survive this. We really are. But anyways, so what's at the top of your list these days in terms of the world of
Well,
politics and third parties?
basically, I don't remember where we left off.
Yeah, right.
It's like I have
The
no idea
long
what we were
distance
talking
memory.
about.
Well, fortunately, nothing's really happened in the last couple of weeks. So,
Yeah, nothing too big. I mean, the main things
yeah.
to me, that I've been sort of thinking about is that I think we're having two sort of huge social experiments going on in the country right now. I think one is in California with Prop 50, and I think the other one is in New York with Mamdani. And
Yeah.
obviously, there's the specifics of those issues, but I think that there's some interesting things that create a lot of unknowns. Um, for both. So I mean, I'd kind of start with Prop 50 since it's in our backyard and it's California. And
Yeah.
we've talked about Prop 50 before, but now we know that it's passed, so
Yep.
it's coming. And
What we think.
yeah, and that's where the rubber hits the road because as soon as it passed, obviously the lawsuits started, and so there's a couple different
Yep.
ones. One about how the districts were drawn, as far as like who was included in what district, and that lawsuit I think is being brought by one of the congressmen that's going to lose their district. So that's kind of an understandable person to be bringing a suit. And then the other part of it is
Yep.
the constitutionality of Proposition 50 and whether or not it's going to hold constitutional muster. And I know I talked about this a little bit on one of the previous shows, but I'm just fascinated by it because to me it's so obvious that the Prop 50 is unconstitutional. The way the districts were drawn, it didn't utilize the independent commission in California, which California's constitution says is required that the independent commission draw the districts, regardless of when they're drawn. They still have to be drawn by the
Yeah.
commission. And it's like now I want to see what happens with the court cases. Do we have a court system in the United States that is capable of paying proper respect to the constitutions of the states? And if the court systems in the states don't pay attention to the state's constitution, what does that mean for the federal constitution? And there's so many lawsuits brewing right now about so many different things. And well, of course, one of the ones that impacted Prop 50 in the first place was the idea that the Supreme Court ruled that you couldn't have race based and minority majority districts anymore. And that threw chaos into so many districts in the United States. So these are big constitutional issues, and it's interesting to see if we have the wherewithal left in the United States to get through them.
Well, and I mean, going back to the race-based districts, I mean that's basically the premise that the Texas
Yeah.
map was thrown out, right?
Yep.
And it is going to be interesting. I don't know. I always keep trying hard, even though I'm very pessimistic. I keep trying to pull out being optimistic that maybe through all this chaos with all the states just, hey, let's just be blatant about gerrymandering
Mhm.
in any which way possible. That people will finally come together and make it a true some true federal legislation over this because it's just not benefiting anybody doing these gimmicks. And if people are truly concerned about you know all the political pandering going on and campaign finance and all that kind of stuff, then this is one of the core pieces of it
Yeah.
in my mind is the whole gerrymandering thing. And it, for I think if they were going to have some kind of gerrymandering, I would be totally in favor of gerrymander the districts so as many of them as possible are toss-up districts.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I would be 100% for that. So if we simply change the metric from no, you can't gerrymander so more Republicans win or more Democrats win. Let's just gerrymander them so you don't know who's going to win.
Yeah.
I would be 100% in favor of that.
Yeah. Anything that can interject competition back into the voting
Yeah,
system, I think would generally speaking be a good thing. So
yeah,
again, as they say, that
yeah.
it's an issue which is settled in a sense because we had the vote, but unsettled in the sense that the larger constitutional issues have yet to be, sorted out.
Right. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And from a local level, I mean, it still seems like, in while we paint this picture of some fantasy that they're going to in gerrymandering, which is not going to happen, most likely,
Definitely
that
not.
our only solution right now is to get as many people as possible to register independent and make it as close to a toss up as you can.
Yeah.
So they really don't know they can depend on this big chunk of people. And so I think at least our goal and our mission remains the same until such time something happens. But with the whole like government shut, oh, that's what happened while we were gone. Government shut down for a while. I almost forgot about
There's
that.
that one.
Um, yeah, it actually started before we were, before we kind of went off the air for a little bit, but it did finally close. And basically, nothing happened other than it was shut down for 7, 8 weeks, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And the same issue still exists. And now it's going to, I'm just curious as to what's going to happen come into January when, we're going to go right back into this, right?
Yeah.
So that's where it goes back to where it's gerrymandering, the whole, healthcare insurance fiasco, and it is truly a fiasco, um, or the immigration stuff. The two parties really don't want to solve this problem.
No.
These problems, they're the best talking points to keep everybody divided.
Yep. Yeah. It's interesting that you brought up the shutdown because one of the things that presumably the reason that the Democrats voted not to go with the continuing resolution, however you want to look at it. I mean, I personally would say the reasons the Democrats shut the government down is because they wanted concessions on Medicaid and Obamacare subsidies. So
Right. Yep.
it brings up the larger, greater issue of how do we fix our broken health care system, health coverage system, really is what it is. So
Right.
one thing that happened that never happens is that a politician said something, and in this case it happened to be Trump, that I've been saying forever. And it almost blew me away. I couldn't believe it. He brought up the idea of taking away the subsidies from the insurance companies and taking that money and giving it directly to people. Now, he didn't flesh it out much because Trump is Trump, and Trump just tells you he's got the greatest plan of all time. Just go from there.
He doesn't worry about the detail part.
Right? It's like details don't matter so much. It's only healthcare,
Yeah, right.
It's just do that.
Right, exactly.
But anyway, it brings up something that I've actually
right.
wanted to talk about for kind of a long time, and since we've got kind of a day here, I might as well talk about it for a little bit. So, I believe that the problem we have with our health coverage system is because health insurance, the way that it's structured, fundamentally does not and cannot work. And I include
Right.
in healthcare insurance as private insurance, but also Medi-Cal and Medicare. At the end of the day, those things are insurers. They're just government run insurance versus private run insurance. And so,
Yep.
and here's the reason it won't ever work. And the reason that Obamacare has driven up rates and coverage costs, such a dramatic amount. And that is because of the middleman. So the way health coverage works in the United States is an individual pays an insurer, whether that insurer is private or government, and then that insurer pays some negotiated amount of money to a provider. And for the privilege of paying that amount to the provider, they suck out some huge amount of bureaucratic pay, whether it's for profit for private insurers or for unbelievably massive bureaucracies and fraud for government insurers. But either way, a huge quantity of money that should be paying for people's health care is just getting sucked out for
Yeah.
health coverage. And so here's what I would say. We scrap the health coverage insurance model for something that looks more like a banking model. So every person in the country has a health savings account. The government could subsidize those accounts and put some money into them. But what I would say is that those accounts would be interest bearing. So when you're young, you start putting savings into your health savings, and then it pays an interest rate. So when you're older, there is a much greater amount of money in your account. Now, you deal with your health decisions on your own. You go to your own doctor, your own provider, and you negotiate a payment that is sensible and that you can understand. And that now, instead of having one massive bureaucracy agreeing to pay some huge, massive amount, you re-empower the American people to negotiate cost with healthcare providers all across the country. So now you can start actually bringing the cost of health care down, which is something no one ever actually talks about. All they ever talk about is, how big is your subsidy going to be? How much are you going to pay for your insurance? That's coverage, not care.
Yeah.
You can't get the cost of
Exactly.
coverage down if you can't get the cost of care down. So now you're starting to get the cost of care down. The next layer is that now that people are paying for their own medical care and they don't have this blanket coverage which pays, every time they need to wipe their ass, insurance can go back to being actual insurance. So you take out a policy that says, if I exceed the amount of money in my account, then my insurance can kick in. So it's catastrophic coverage, which is exactly what insurance is. You have a huge pool of people paying into the insurance, most of whom will never use it because they won't end up exceeding the cost of the amount of money that they have in their coverage. And now insurance can be insurance again, which will help cover people against catastrophic loss, which is what insurance is actually good at. Next, when you die, the government can take 75% of your account and you can pass on the other 25% of it to somebody else. That helps to pay for the 5% interest that they're paying on everybody's account, so it can start to break even. And with luck, it might even exceed that amount of money, in which case people in very low income brackets could receive a subsidy to be paid directly into their health savings accounts, which they could only use for savings for health, not for other frivolous things, but would be there for health. And so you could benefit the low income community with some subsidies. You could help the entire community with interest and with the ability to negotiate for lower costs. You would help the insurance industry by creating actual catastrophic coverage, which could actually be a boon for many people. And places like California wouldn't have no cover anymore. And then you could actually have a much more workable, much more affordable, much more independent medical care system by getting rid of all this disingenuous health coverage nonsense, which is just pricing everyone out of the market. Because again, the shutdown was about subsidies. It's like, how much did we subsidize people's insurance so they can get this lousy insurance that the actual providers don't accept? So it was awful. And of course, we shut the government down and did nothing anyway. So instead of addressing the actual problem, coming up with a new creative solution that could actually work, we just created a bigger mess.
Well, it's interesting. What you just described, a business partner and I, oh gosh, 15 years ago, 20 years ago almost now, worked on a project with the Amish.
There
And
you
you,
go.
seriously,
Yeah.
and you pretty much described their insurance. They how they're not part of any big conglomerate or anything. They do it internally within that community. And basically the premise is you pay in 10% of whatever your income is
Mm-hmm.
each year. And then um, they pay for your medical care in cash and negotiate with the local doctors and say, and those local doctors are happy to take half, 50% of their normal rate
Yep.
because they don't have to go through
All the rigmarole.
bureaucratic paperwork.
Right.
And literally, it is worth it to them to get half their rate because the the guys just walk in with cash and it's like, here's, your doctor appointment and whatever, $200. Well, for them, it's $100 because they just give them cash.
Yep.
And that's pretty much what you described as what they've been doing forever.
Yeah.
And it was for that simple purpose. Our premise was, how do you make this affordable and reasonable and get people the care they need? It was focused on getting the care you need, not about, the insurance payment part
Right.
of it. And so I absolutely, and I think that whole kind of model you described also could work in essence for a replacement for Social Security.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same idea. It's like, hey, let's just pay in because Social Security is built. It's a house of cards at this point.
Yeah.
It's going to fail at some point. We just, depending on who you talk to, they'll give you a different date, but it's going to fail. But it's not, again, it's not that there isn't enough money.
Yeah.
If you actually add it all up, it's all the bureaucracy that's attached to handling that.
Yeah.
And with the health part, the only thing I would change maybe I misunderstood, but when you're younger, I think you do almost have to be somewhat forced into paying into the HSA because otherwise you get back into this revolving door, right? That's like, well, I didn't want to pay this year, so but I'm still sick.
Yeah. No. I don't think I mentioned that at all. But yes, it would be the same thing as like paying into Social Security or like the
Right.
Medicare tax, except it would go into your personal
private
HSA,
account,
right? That you would have control over, which would be, as I say, an interest-bearing account. So instead of paying into some government monopoly that you have no say in and doesn't really look out for your needs, you would have your own account for which you could pay for your own healthcare. And then, you can even make provisions for like if people wanted to create co-ops where they were, able to, benefit from each other's, saving systems, and you could sort of group some of this together. I mean, even that, if you want to have better negotiating power or, other things, you could.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All kinds of things.
Yeah. No, exactly. And that's kind of what the Amish did. Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely.
They
have to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. No, exactly. But that's the frustrating part. And again, hopefully you get more people involved beyond these two parties to start thinking. And I don't think any of this stuff is thinking out of the box. This is just common sense.
Yeah.
These are not, this shouldn't be a radical idea. I mean, the idea that you pay a little bit, just like a savings account in essence, and it literally a savings account that bears some interest. Hey, that just makes total sense. You're paying anyways.
Yeah.
And now the insurance companies, insurance lobbies will fight tooth and nail because they're having their most profitable years ever right now.
Yeah.
And that's what all the more reason to not vote for Democrats or Republicans right now because they're all paid by them.
Right. Well, I mean, that's, as I say, that would be a plank in my idea for a third party. And the idea would be like, someone comes to you and says, well, the insurance companies would be against it. My response would obviously be, who cares?
So
we're not in it for the insurance. We're a party that represents people, and people need something different. The insurance model for healthcare and health coverage just simply doesn't work. And as I say, I can't stress this enough. It's fundamentally flawed. I mean, the whole idea of insurance is that you have a big pool of people that pay into it, and you only have to
Right.
occasionally pay something out when something goes bad. Now that payout may be very large, but it's dwarfed by the side of the payment pool. So, like homeowners insurance at one point before California went crazy was one of the more affordable things you could have. You pay a few
Yeah.
$100, maybe $1,000,
Yeah.
depending on your assets, a month, and you'd have millions of dollars in coverage if you needed it. So
Right.
it was a pretty good bargain. It worked out well for people. But
Yep.
with healthcare, everybody gets sick. So the risk
Yeah.
pool is not the same thing anymore. So it's like
Right.
we created this situation where, like, when you go to a doctor and you pay your copay, the reason you're paying a copay is because the insurance is paying something. Insurance is involved in every single little thing that you do. If you stub your toe and you have to go to the doctor to get, 2 stitches put in, well, the insurance company injects itself in there. Even if the insurance company doesn't end up paying anything directly for that particular thing, the prices for things have been negotiated by the insurance companies. So even in that
Exactly.
respect, the insurance companies are interjecting themselves into things. So it's like you're paying for this huge, huge bureaucracy that does nothing but raise prices. And I think Obamacare and the ACA thing is like the perfect example. When they passed that, we were told that this was going to be this panacea that was going to bring costs down, and you could keep your doctor and you could keep your insurance and you could do this and that, and all this great stuff was going to happen. And prices have gone up astronomically since that was passed. So much to the extent that, they're having to subsidize people because people can't afford the insurance that they were promised they were going to be able to afford. I mean, hell, it's called the
Right.
Affordable Care Act. If the care is so affordable, why are you subsidizing it? Because it obviously was never affordable and it never was going to be.
Well, again, because it was never about, to your point, it was never about health care. It was all about health
Right.
insurance. And that was the wrong thing to try and fix.
Exactly.
And but again, it's like, it's going to be interesting now, since with the shutdown over, and it's really going to now be, I think, on the Republicans' shoulders to figure out how do you get out of this mess, because the Democrats have positioned themselves as, well, we tried, and now that your insurance rates just doubled, don't look at us, and and then we're going to just keep going through this back and forth
Okay.
versus trying to solve the problem.
First of all, I think it's very important to say that the insurance rates didn't just double, your subsidy was cut in half. So, I mean, in a sense, that matters
No,
because, again, it's like we're fighting over subsidies. So we're not even
right?
fighting over coverage anymore. And we're certainly not fighting over care. So there's
No,
that.
God
Then
no.
on to the Republican side of the issue is the Republicans control everything federally. They've got, the Senate, they've got the
Yep.
House, and they've got the president. Pass a budget. And don't just pass a budget, pass laws so that the government doesn't get shut down anymore. I mean, for God's sakes,
They
just
can't.
pass laws so that, when you have a spending freeze, there's some agreed upon format of how that spending freeze is handled. Whatever you want it to be, loans or structured payments, along the way or whatever. But this idea that, Congress decides to not do anything and then the president gets to just like lay people off. Well, who came up with that?
Right.
That's absolutely nuts. So the Republicans need to like you say, step up, take responsibility. First of all, pass a budget so that for at least a
Yep.
year, for God's sakes, we
Yep.
don't have this problem, and then pass legislation that ends even the potential for a government shutdown, so that when the government, if the government quote unquote shuts down, everybody knows exactly how it's going to run, exactly how it's going to work, exactly who's going to do what, and then that's that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I know. And but unfortunately, I'm afraid we're going to continue to go down this black hole of
Oh yeah.
continuing resolutions and all this kind of stuff. Whereas, hey, if you set a deadline, um, it's one of those things where if we can find some good independently minded candidates out there, and hopefully there are third party candidates that basically make the proposal that, hey, in the next year, take one issue at a time. Let's say healthcare, whatever. And in the next year, we're going to solve this, or we as Congress do not get any pay.
Yeah.
That's their job.
I actually think there should be.
And because that was the crazy part about the shutdown, right? They're all still getting paid during this whole thing.
Yep.
And it's like, and that was always Warren Buffett's thing. He says, well, the easiest way to get government to become more efficient is if they don't pass a budget, they don't get paid.
Yeah. But I'd take it even farther. I don't think it's just about not getting paid. For every day that the government is shut down, every senator should be fined $1 million, and every House member should be fined $500,000. There. Now it will never shut down again.
Right.
Problem solved.
Right. Right.
But just pass the law.
No,
that
exactly.
That. You shut the government down, you're fined $1 million, and the next day you're fined another $1 million. I mean, what are you doing?
It's amazing how quickly they would respond.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I know. And so, yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I'm trying to remain optimistic that with at least the gerrymandering, it called everybody on the carpet. Everybody looked like everybody. And when I say everybody, I mean the states in particular, California probably leading the charge, looks ridiculous.
Yeah.
It finally exposed the, basically in my mind, a crime of how all the elections are being handled. I'm not saying that there's a lot of fraud going on or anything like that, but the fact that we have a system that really isn't representing people fairly.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And you really don't have choices. You really don't have choices. And that applies to almost every state, other than the handful of states that are sort of swing states.
Yep.
But there's fewer and fewer of those. So
yes,
let's call it for what it is.
No, I definitely agree. Yeah, I figure we're getting pretty close to the end here. For our impromptu show. So
yeah,
but I did want to mention one thing, just because it occurred to me and I thought it was a funny idea. So, Mamdani in New York. So, whether or not he can actually do any of the things that he says he wants to do, I mean, God only knows. But let's just say, for sake of the argument, that he does. That would include getting rid of all the jails and having everybody get like free housing. So, if I was running a state like California or Oklahoma or Texas or Florida, I would say, if you are somebody who's coming out of jail, you've recently coming out of incarceration, you can get a fresh start in New York City. They won't incarcerate you for anything, and they'll give you everything for free. I have a bus ticket right here for you as you walk out of jail.
Yeah,
Would you like to go to New York City and
like to check it out?
Free housing, free food, free everything, no police, no more Rikers Island, cashless bail. Here's the ticket, New York City.
Yeah.
I just wonder if that'll happen.
Well, no, it is, it is unfortunate. One of those byproducts of those kinds of things. That's why California has the homeless issue that we do. People are going to, even as bad as it is, I mean, because I still think the conditions are deplorable, but that's not so much because there aren't services out there. It's just the people aren't of right mind to actually avail themselves of it. But for those who do, why wouldn't you come here?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't, So I know, again, it always comes back down to, what are we trying to solve? What is the true measurement of success? And we just, from generally a government policy standpoint, we just keep missing the mark. We keep focusing on, the tactics of things versus what are we really trying to do here?
Yeah.
And, what's the goal? And so we have these pardon the pun, Band-Aids on healthcare.
Yeah.
Healthcare insurance, right? So,
yeah.
Yeah. Just keep on plugging, man. Put it out there in the big world. Everybody needs to start, because I think there really or truly are so many more people like you and me who are just wanting to see the problems get addressed.
Yeah.
Not It's not an ideology thing. Just let's just work on the problems and get away from all this political crap.
Yeah. It's just an unfortunate thing where the politicians are always they're looking for something that can be used as a divisive issue to cordon off their voters to make them get the
They
vote
want
that
us
they want.
divided.
But in that kind of ideology excludes the possibility of solutions that are good for everyone, because solutions that are good for
Yep,
everyone aren't good for the politicians, which is why we need something new. We need a new party that's
exactly.
dedicated to the idea that they want to help the most people the most that they can. And because it's the party is based on that, it behooves them to do that because they don't have any other lane to be in. The other two lanes are already taken up. So they're there for the
Yep,
people, and that's why they exist. So, one day, maybe.
love it. Perfect way to wrap it up.
Yep.
All right, man. Good catching up again.
Yep. Oh,
Talk to you next week.
yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Okay. Okay. Talk to you in a bit.
Yeah.